First of all, thank you so much for joining this and accepting my invite for this podcast and this interview.
Thank you so much. I'm excited to be here.
And I know you for, I think, almost 3 months now through Twitter Spaces and different other engagement. I've been following you since January, and the type of writing that you do, type of encouragement that you give to fellow writers and other people, that's what kind of got me into following you and then requesting you to come to this show.
Oh, that's so nice. Thank you.
Before we begin, I wanted to give you an opportunity to tell what you do, why people would want to connect with you.
Perfect. So my name is Samantha Demers, and I am mostly active on Twitter. I've been active for about a year. I'm an older millennial. I used to work for the House of Commons of Canada. I had an established career there for 12 years. I quit 4 years ago and wanted to become a content creator or write a book or start a podcast, which was part of my idea of quitting my job and trying to do something else. But I didn't create any content for 4 years. I kept thinking I would, but I didn't. And finally, a year ago, I got tired of waiting and realized that if I hadn't started creating for 4 years, that I wouldn't. So even though I had ideas and I had half-written blog posts and outlines for YouTube videos or things like that, I didn't put anything out there. So a year ago, I decided to start sharing my ideas on Twitter. I didn't have a niche. I didn't exactly know what I was going to talk about. I just knew that I wanted to share my ideas to inspire other people and to see what I could contribute to the world. And over time, my niche has kind of become talking about overcoming imposter syndrome and encouraging other creators to get over their fears and their self-judgment, to give themselves permission to create things and to share their ideas. And I also share the practical ways that I've gone about doing that and how I organize my day and how I don't burn out as a content creator.
And I will add your Twitter hyperlink and everything in the show notes. Whoever watching, Samantha is one of the nicest person out there on Twitter who will help you and will go to any extent to help and mentor you.
That's so nice. Thank you.
So let's go back to many year high school. What do you wanted to become?
So I was homeschooled as a child. And so even in high school, I was homeschooled. I'm the oldest of 5 kids and I live in Canada. And it's not super common to homeschool, not as common as the United States, but there are Canadians that homeschool. So I had a hard time figuring out what I wanted to do. My mom did put me in a lot of extra programs. So I did sports and drama and music and different things. But I know for a long while, I wanted to be a police officer. That's something I was really interested in. And then for a little while, I wanted to be a dentist or a lawyer, but just typical jobs that people want to be. And nothing really stood out. And so I've always struggled to really find my passion and what I really want to do. So I just stumbled into the job that I got, which was doing different types of office work. And finally, around 22 or 23 years old, I got the job at the House of Commons and I had started doing office work around 17 years old and just continued down that path. So that's sort of, I didn't have a really clear idea of what I wanted. And then I just followed whatever came up.
Thank you for sharing that. And then how did you start your career journey?
So I got a job in an office when I was pretty young, helping somebody organize their office. They had a small business and they helped me and mentored me with administrative tasks and doing reception. And from there, I worked in different offices. I worked for a car dealership in their admin department. I worked for a nonprofit for United Way for a little while. I worked at other different government jobs. I moved to Montreal when I first got married. I worked for the Montreal Gazette for a few months when I would live there. So I just did a lot of office jobs over time. And then each time I moved to a new city or a new job opportunity, I took what I had learned at my last jobs and just kept applying it to my new jobs.
Okay. And then you said your last job was a government job?
Yeah. So my main career was at the House of Commons, and I got that job through, I was working for an agency looking for some full-time work, and I got placed there. And then over time applied and got a full-time position. Most of the time there, I did second language tests, and I also did other admin jobs over my career there. At the end, I got my dream job, which was to be the event coordinator. And I really loved that job because I got to incorporate creativity as well as being really planned and organized. And I like those two sides. And it's rare to find that in a job, which is probably why it was hard for me to choose a job from a normal list of what would you like to be when you grow up? Because knowing that you're creative but also organized, there's not jobs that kind of fit that description very often. But I really enjoyed that when I was an event coordinator. And now I think I like that too with content creation, that I have to be organized and planned, but also be creative and come up with ideas.
Everybody says that that's a switch between left side of the brain and right side of the brain.
Yeah, I find that with my writing, I have that issue where I could be either in really creative, like flowing, coming up with ideas mode, but then the editing, it's like you have to stop. And if you're doing it at the same time and you stop and you go to edit, it's like a different part of your brain. And then even from there, if I'm editing and then have to write the headline, that's also another part, which is kind of creative, but strategic at the same time. And then if you're putting it on Twitter, you also have to have a lead-in tweet, which is a little bit different than the body and the main message. So then that's a whole other part of my brain that I use. So usually I find it better to break up the time, to come back to it or do it the next day, to do these different stages. But the times that I have to do them all at once, I've noticed that it really does stretch my brain because I'm going to these different parts to try to figure out how to do it and tapping into these different functions.
Yeah. At the House of Commons, you had your dream job and you decided to leave that. What's the thought process there?
Yeah, that was a really difficult decision. So I had the role for about 18 months. And during that time, I loved the job. I loved the team that I was on. I had a lot of work on my plate. And so I started to get burnt out. But I also started to see more and more people that were doing things online and really enjoying their life, or saying they'd quit their job and now traveled the world or did different things or moved to another country. And when I would think, oh, I would like to do that, I realized that because I was stuck in this job and would have to be there till I was 55 at least, which would be a young age to retire, I couldn't leave the country, or I couldn't move somewhere else or travel for fun as much. So I was burnt out at the end. I had a micromanaging boss that I couldn't put up with anymore. And also my dream had changed. So even though I had my dream job, my dream had changed. And I think having the burnout as well as the micromanaging boss and things like that made me realize that I had to make a decision for myself to quit my job. And it was really hard to make because I'm a responsible person. I had a mortgage. I have two kids that were in elementary school at the time. But I also realized that when I thought about my daughters, and if one of them would come to me and say, Mom, I have this really great job and I feel really guilty quitting it, but there's other things that I want to try doing. Of course, I would tell them that they could quit and they should try something else. But for myself, I couldn't give myself permission to quit my job or to try something else. So I decided that I couldn't be a hypocrite with my kids, and therefore I should be an example. And if that's something that I wanted to do, to just pursue doing that. And I also decided that I would rather spend the next 20 years trying to figure out what I wanted to do and how I wanted to do it and make something work, rather than being in a safe job for the next 20 years and then go and try to enjoy my life. But I would be older. So I decided I'd rather do it the other way.
So you did not have any other stream of income and you quit.
No, I had my husband was working, and so it would be enough to get by.
Okay.
So I quit my job and started to figure out what I wanted to do. A different department offered me part-time work, so I went there for another 6 months, and then I left there and I did some different freelancing work and started to build up my skills doing marketing and writing. And so I did some freelance work and then started working more with my husband, who does online marketing. And as I built up my skills, I was contributing to his business as well. So we couldn't go on vacations and we couldn't do as many fun things, but I decided that it was worth a sacrifice, but it wasn't complete, like no money at all. We did have enough to get by, but just I had to cut out a lot of other things out of my life.
Okay. So this question is for people who are in job and want to start a a aspiration in the writing and creative field, what would be your advice, or what would, maybe just sharing the details of the step that you have taken from the point you resigned from that job? How did you get the freelancing? What did you do for next like 1 year um, to build up your presence?
Yeah, so I think that one of the best things to do is, if you're able to, if you can stick it out with your job, especially if you need the income, to start to get the skills that are things that you could do online easily. So even if you want to write a novel and be a writer, you could build up your skills of writing by learning copywriting or other writing skills that are in demand, so that you could start to bring in income from that while you do your aspirational writing or something you really want to
Mhm.
do. So I think that if you can give yourself time to start to learn those skills by reading good books or looking up YouTube videos and learn about sales or marketing or building a business or building websites or something that you'd be interested in to do on the side, that would also help you get income later on, so you have some other source of income when you decide to quit your full-time job. And then you could have more time to work on your fun thing, but you'd have another secure income, as well as a skill that would help you with whatever you want to do. So if you learn copywriting, it'll help you as a content creator. If you learn how to build a website, it'll help you. So these are skills that would be helpful
Yeah.
for your personal brand. And for me, I started learning about marketing a lot, and then I got into copywriting and understanding copywriting and persuasive writing, and it fascinated me a lot, and marketing fascinates me. So I think if I would have known about these types of careers when I was younger, I might have studied marketing or maybe studied psychology or therapy, because I find it really interesting. It just wasn't something that was presented to me when I was younger, but I like helping people. But the only jobs I knew of to help people were nurses, and I didn't really want to be a nurse. So I I think that the best way to do it is to start to build those skills, and then slowly try to find clients by doing work for free or going on websites like Fiverr or Upwork and starting to just see if you can actually do the work and build up your portfolio, so you can get to the place where you start bringing in some money doing those kind of skills that you've built up. And then you can slowly switch over to quitting your job and having another source of income and have the time to work on the thing that you really want. And then you don't have to put the pressure on your writing or your content creation or your YouTube videos to make you money. And you can allow that to grow slowly and find your true niche and what really brings you joy in it, if you don't have to put pressure on that content creation to bring in your income.
As you were suggesting, find free project, and you found in marketing and then some other areas. So how did you find those?
I did some Google search and was in different Facebook groups where people would talk about where they were hiring people or looking for them. I found a place to freelance as a writer and found places to apply online. And so I would just started applying, and even without much of a portfolio, just by probably my life experience and saying that I had worked at the government. So people started to hire me for freelance writing and content writing and SEO writing, that because I was already a person that had a job doing administrative work. So they knew that I could
Mhm.
write, and I just did a couple of tests. And that's kind of how I found clients when I was doing some freelance work.
How did you build your skills? You said you started learning for marketing and copywriting. So what was the thing that you did?
I read a lot of books and just started doing the work. So I I was doing more content writing at first, and so with that, I would look at other blogs or blog posts
Mhm.
and then look at what the client wanted, and sometimes rewrite things that for them to make it more flow better. And but that was because of having read so much marketing books and copywriting to know
Mhm.
how it should write, like, shorter sentences and that sort of thing, especially for online writing. And these are things I sort of picked up just over time of being online and seeing how things are done, and that sentences, although in my job at the House of Commons, the structure had to be very formal. I could see that online writing was more informal, especially in North America and for selling and that sort of thing. So I just sort of applied what I was seeing elsewhere in the writing that I was doing for clients.
And then you continue to grow and get more and more projects.
Yes. Yeah.
So last question on this. During
Yeah.
this time, what was keeping you motivated and continue to go? How did you keep yourself motivated and consistent?
I just really didn't want to have to get full-time work again. I really enjoyed being able to set my own pace. I really liked that if I had to go pick up my daughter at school because she was sick, that I could just get up and go. I liked that if I had energy on a Saturday, that I could do my writing, but if I was tired on a Wednesday, I could go do my groceries. I liked that schedule so much that I was willing to do what it takes to find other clients and keep going. And I also liked the work a lot, but a few times I thought about going into the work full time, like looking for somewhere in my city that was hiring a full-time position. But I really liked having the freedom of my schedule. So I decided that I would rather keep that. And also in the back of my mind, I wanted to do the aspirational things of starting a podcast or content writing or writing a book. So I wanted to keep my freedom so that I could pursue those things, but I just didn't pursue them for a long time.
Just to confirm, I'm not aware that you have a podcast or a YouTube channel. Do you?
I'm just about to start a podcast, but I don't have a YouTube channel because I've been too scared to do video and have to edit and put on makeup every day. So I don't have a YouTube channel.
All I can say, you're very comfortable in front of camera.
Oh, thank you.
So I've been doing this for 6 months now. I can share each and every step of how I do, and I can help you get started.
Oh, okay, great.
How did you figure that this is the segment of the people you want to help, and this particular thing like imposter syndrome, and how did you figure that's the area where you will be working?
I struggled for a long time to find my niche. I started a year ago by joining Ship 30 for 30.
You did that.
Yeah. I was looking at, I was going to do a YouTube channel, and then I decided that was too much work and I was too scared. And then I thought, well, I'll start with writing. So I went on Medium and started to look at other writers, and I noticed that a lot of them were connected on Twitter. So I thought, oh, I guess writers hang out on Twitter. And I had a really old account, but I barely used it. I had 100 followers, but they were from a decade ago. So I just started going on Twitter more and more. And that's where I saw Ship 30 for 30. So I decided to sign up in order to push me to start to have to put my ideas out there. And I had no idea what to write. I did like calculate what your content buckets are going to be and write out these ideas. And I didn't really follow the ideas that I had set out that I thought I was going to do. I went and just tried to decide every day what I would write. So my first one was about quitting my job. I wrote other ones about having harmony in your relationships. I wrote about pursuing happiness and that it's not selfish. I just kept trying different ideas all the time. And I thought that at the end of the 30 days that I would know what my niche was and it would be clear. And I even wrote about marketing and copywriting, and I still didn't find something that I loved. But I was enjoying Twitter so much, and I had made friends through people with Ship 30 for 30. And around that time had discovered Twitter Spaces and started hosting spaces, that I decided to stay on Twitter. So I kept writing threads from time to time. And just as I was writing and interacting with people, I kept thinking that my niche would become clear. Even when I hosted spaces, I thought it would be clear. But now I realize that it takes a long time of creating content to really figure out what you like to talk about. Because although I had no idea what to talk about, I just knew I wanted to just share ideas and inspire other people. I know a lot of people that have had a really clear niche, but then 3 months or 6 months or a year later, realize they really want to talk about something else. And so my niche of imposter syndrome kind of came up because I was, somebody asked me if I wanted to be in a book writing challenge to write a book in 30 days. And I didn't know what to talk about. I had book ideas, but nothing really inspired me. So I finally decided to just talk about imposter syndrome and getting over it as a creator. And so I drafted this book pretty quickly in August, and then started being invited to talk about it on podcasts or on other Twitter spaces. And I realized a lot of people were interested in this subject. And as I've continued in my content creation journey, although I talk about imposter syndrome a lot on podcasts and I sometimes send tweets about it, I also write a lot about how to create content and not burn out, and encouraging new creators to get started and to get over their fears, which also has to do with imposter syndrome, but can be other areas of the
Mhm.
fears and things that they're might feel stuck with. So for me, I think that just sharing a lot is kind of how you find your niche, because there's things that I love. Like I love marketing, but I don't talk about it on Twitter. And I could talk about it all day with other marketers, but I don't like sharing about it on Twitter. And I really love personality types and figuring people
Yeah.
out, but I don't talk about that on Twitter either. It just doesn't interest me to share it there. And I don't know why, but these other areas do. And I find that that happens to a lot of people. So really finding your niche should just be, even if you have something in your mind, just start sharing ideas and then see what happens, and if you really enjoy it, because it might not be something that you like as much as you thought you did.
In my case, I started writing as a hobby, and I wanted to write about everything and anything, anything that I'm doing. I want to share that, but at the same time, that's not helping me either, because
Mm,
then I don't have a clear audience in that sense. So now, for last 1 year, I have narrowed it down to exactly the people who are I'm trying to help, and in this case the people who just started their career, or people who have been in the same job for, like, say, 4 years, 5 years, and trying to see what the next thing that they want to do.
yeah.
So that's the audience. But every day I have to rethink, does this include entrepreneur or just the people in 9 to 5 job? Does this include people in the leadership or just the people who are in at the mid-level? Happy for you that you know exactly what you like to write and who you're writing for.
Yeah, it's taken a long time to figure that out, but I think that just practicing and sharing different things it makes it more clear over time. And for me, it more became about who I was talking to and not necessarily what I was talking about. So I know that I
Mhm.
want to talk to creators that are struggling, and so with that, it just kind of always brings me back to, okay, this is what I talk about.
You have a clarity about creators and imposter syndrome, but the same imposter syndrome, people who are in job or entrepreneur, or you name it, right? Video YouTubers or different type of creative people, they all have this. How did you figure that just the creator, not other type of people? Because everybody can get the benefit from this.
Yeah, it's funny because I've been on a couple of podcasts where they asked me about imposter syndrome in your career and imposter
Yeah.
syndrome for younger people or imposter syndrome when you're older. But I I guess I was thinking, especially as I was writing the title of the book about, the creator's guide to overcoming imposter syndrome, I was just trying to make it really narrow so that I would have a very clear audience of who it would be for. And then if other people find it useful, they can read it. And so I write it from the perspective of my imposter syndrome that I felt creating and being an older millennial mom that used to work for the government. So my life's been pretty boring. So who am I to be a content creator or share my ideas? Who am I even to talk about imposter syndrome? I don't have a PhD, or I'm not a psychologist or psychiatrist that knows about imposter syndrome. So I just wanted to encourage other creators how they can get over it. And it affects a lot more people than I thought. I thought it was just me or, a small segment of people
Yeah.
that are like me, but it affects so many people.
I have handled and project managed such a big project for my full-time job. Um, I work at Event Health. When we were changing the branding, I was working with about 70 people and coordinating this big ship that would launch on 2nd of January. And on that night, I had 35 people in this big conference room and 35 five people on phone in the conference. So I was coordinating with 70 people from 9 p.m. to 4 a.m.
Wow.
And then recently, beginning of the March, I did this again about 50 people from my department and another 50 people from other departments. So I have done that. I have delivered such a massive project for my company, my department, my team. But when I talk about um, a write-up for time management or project management or a video, I feel like, can I? Like, there are so many great project managers there. Who am I?
Yeah.
So it's everywhere there. Even um, yeah, it just everywhere. This imposter syndrome is everywhere.
Yeah, you're right.
I want to touch on this ship 30 for 30. If you're comfortable, I wanted to ask you for a quick, a few minute honest review on that. If anybody is interested, or if I want to do this, what would be your opinion? What would be your review or recommendation for the people who have not done it?
So for me, Ship 30 for 30, which is a program by Dickie Bush and Nicholas Cole, it's really helpful if you're getting started online, if you over edit, if you write too long, if you don't get engagement with your writing, if you're struggling with headlines and how to write really well for the internet so that you get attention on your writing. It's also a really great place to make friends and to get connections with people so that you start to build your online audience and meet with other creators. I find that it's super helpful for that. And if you are an established writer, if you're very comfortable in writing, if you have a big community already online, it might not be as helpful, but you may like it in order to connect with some new people anyway. What I've noticed is that there are some people that have really established creative careers, like established podcasters or YouTubers, or even writers in other areas, but they enjoy Ship 30 for 30 to make new connections and kind of learn a different style of writing. So for me, it was really helpful, especially as a beginner, to help me get started, to force me to do those 30 days. But also the side benefits were building my Twitter community very quickly, because I was connecting with people I was meeting on the Zoom calls and the other, being in their group in the Circle channel that they have. So I find that was really helpful for that. And also the curriculum that they teach about how to write for online, how to write good headlines, and how to start to find your niche, even though you don't often come away absolutely knowing your niche right away. It gets you started thinking about how do you mix in your personality and the different things that you like to find that perfect niche for you. So I think that the curriculum is really helpful, and the community is only full of super supportive people. I've never met anyone that's in the community that's a mean person or judgmental or feels like they're better than you. Like, everyone is super nice.
And I've seen their website. There's a ton of information just for free.
Yeah, they do. And even if you follow them on Twitter, they both write amazing threads that share a lot of information about writing and about the skills that they've acquired since becoming online writers. So they give away a lot of information for free, for sure.
I want to make a comment. You've been saying that it took me a long time to find a niche, but you're talking about 1.5 years, right? That's it?
It took me like maybe 5 or 6 months, and I didn't feel like this was really my niche until maybe 3 months ago. So even though I was kind of already writing about creators and about imposter syndrome, and I had already written the book about it and have most of it done, I still wasn't sure if that was my niche. I still felt uncomfortable, and is this really what I want to talk about? So it's maybe in February of this year, which would make it like about 11 months since I started creating, that I was like, all right, I think this is my niche. This is what I enjoy talking about. I was already on podcast interviews and YouTube Live, and I've done some different talks like that. And I still didn't feel like it was my niche, but people kept asking me to talk about things. So I just kept talking about them. But now I feel like, okay, this is my niche.
Yeah, so that's a very quick time frame. I've been writing for 3 years. I was still struggling.
You'll get there. Maybe you're just more general, or you have this one about talking to the people that want to do a life change in their work. So that's a really good niche.
I think the thing with me is I'm too afraid to lose the other opportunities. So I never married to one idea, but I think I'm realizing that to get better and go ahead in work that I'm trying to do, I have to dedicate my next few years, next or life, to one idea, because I can't do all the ideas. So I think that's my struggle.
Yeah. Yeah, I think maybe that was what made me hesitate as well, was thinking like I'd be stuck in this niche. Is this really what I want to
Yes.
do? But I enjoy talking about it and I haven't gotten tired of it. And I think that's what showed me it was my niche, is that people got asked me different aspects, like about imposter syndrome, about how to send Twitter DMs, how to connect with people, how to build a community, how to not burn out, and different things like that. And I could just always find things to talk about. And I didn't really realize that until I was invited to share on a podcast or in a Twitter space about those sorts of things, thinking that, oh, I have nothing to say. I'll just talk for a few minutes and I'll have nothing else to say about it. But then realize I could go on and on and on about these things. So then I realized, well, I guess I could talk about this, and there's enough aspects to it that it keeps me interested, that it's never boring. So there's that. I don't want to be bored.
This is what we will do. Uh, we will do a second episode just on imposter syndrome.
Yeah, sure.
That can help a lot of people.
Yeah. Especially when it comes to your career and trying
Yeah.
something new. Like it's very intimidating to step out from what you've been doing to do something new.
All right. So now I wanted to ask you what your typical day looked like.
So right now my days aren't super typical. They're always up and down. I have a business with my husband where we do online marketing, so I'm busy with that. So in between, I do some work with him, and then I have Twitter spaces that I host a couple of times a week. So then I'll often stop and then go and host a Twitter spaces. Sometimes I have interviews like this, so then that will be something that happens in my day, and then I go back to my computer to work on the copy that I have to write or answer customer service questions. Then I also have a community group that I run in Discord. And so once or twice a month, we meet on Zoom calls. So then I set up those calls and talk with the people in that group about setting their goals and staying accountable. So right now my days are up and down, but something that stays consistent is that I always check in on Twitter. I engage with comments. I reply to people in DMs. I create content for Twitter. And that is part of my routine every day. Usually I do most of the catching up in the evening after supper for 30 minutes or an hour. It depends how much I have to do. And otherwise, my day's up and down with doing the spaces or being a guest in a space or a guest on a podcast, but then also doing the business stuff that I have to do. So it's not super typical.
Are you an early riser or late nighter?
I am like in between. And it's really weird because I'm not an early bird and I'm not a night owl either. I don't like to go to bed super early, but I don't go to bed super late. And I don't usually have a lot of energy. Like after 8 or 9 p.m., my husband gets a lot of energy. So he can work like for another 3 hours till midnight or 1 in the morning. And he gets so much work done. But I could be awake, but I'm drained. So my brain just doesn't function. So it's not worth me trying to work because I can't think anymore. But also, I don't wake up at 5 in the morning and do a lot of work. I like to get up like around 7 or 8 and then start my day a little bit later. So I've always found that most of my energy is like between 11 a.m. and 2 p.m., which is annoying because it would be nice if it was other times, but that's when I have the most energy. So that's why I set my Twitter spaces to be at 11 a.m. because I have energy at that time.
Browsing in Twitter or browsing in some other internet is very time consuming. How do you control that?
Most of the time now, I'm so busy engaging in comments or replying to DMs that I don't get stuck in the browsing side. Usually it's when I need to take a break because I'm tired of interacting or I'm just drained. So I'll browse, or I'll also browse in Twitter in order to engage with others to keep that engagement up as well. So I'm not just engaging on my own content. And when I just need to browse and not think about something and just unwind, I'll usually go to Instagram or something where I'm not creating content so that I can just look at what my friends are doing or different content so that I can relax. But most of the time I find now I'm not usually sucked into browsing because I'll be intentional on creating, and that just kind of takes up a lot of my time. And my commitment of building my online presence is engaging with others and keeping the content that I built and the engagement that I've got to keep it going.
What's your advice on people who are wasting too much time, like me?
Are you creating content consistently on Twitter?
Twitter, I mostly browse. Medium or nowadays just video. I'm focusing more on the YouTube right now.
Yeah. Well, if you find that, the time you spend editing and uploading and doing the SEO and the proper headline writing for YouTube, it's probably pretty draining. So you probably need the time on Twitter just to recover and just relax. So I don't feel guilty about it when I do that on Instagram, and I don't feel guilty the nights that I watch Netflix and relax. I like to work hard and I like having goals, but also I like seeing what do I feel like I should do for me instead of all the years that I spent feeling guilty if I needed to rest or if I needed a day off, or I used to feel really guilty about it. Now I've decided, especially since having a burnout at work, that I never want to go through that again. And so I listen to myself. And when I get into modes where I feel like I'm wasting too much time, it's usually because the thing that I'm creating or working on doesn't excite me as much. And so I try to find something that excites me in order to work on it and just have a creative outlet so I'm not killing time. So it's not much advice.
Well, good timing to jump into what's your time management method?
So my time management method is I have deadlines on things, but I try to keep it more flexible because I'm the kind of person that when I have really strict deadlines, I feel really guilty about not meeting them. And it makes me feel this kind of stress inside, even if it's a deadline that I put on myself. So when I put this deadline of having to do something, unless it's something that I really have to do, then it could stress me out. And so I try to keep it a bit more free flowing. Like I have a to-do list and I follow that, but I don't like that feeling of stress that I put on myself when I have too much of a strict schedule. But I have things that have a hard deadline, like when I have to show up at a Twitter space or for an interview, like with you, or if I have a call, then I have obviously a time that I have to be there. So I make sure that I have that and I pay attention to it, and I make sure that I show up on Twitter and I engage. And then for my work, I have to-do lists that I follow and just check in and make sure that I'm getting stuff done. But a lot of work, unless you've really mapped out how you work, most people underestimate the amount of time something takes. And so you say, I'll get this done by the end of the day, but you could be interrupted by so many things that it stresses me out too much to have a super strict time management. So you would think that I'd be bad at events, but I was very good at coordinating events. I just knew like, okay, by this date, I have to talk to this person. And by this date, I have to have this room booked. But I had it free flowing. So I had to do it within a week. So if other things came up, I could meet the deadline that week of this thing I have to have done, but it wasn't as strict as it has to be at this certain time, or else it would usually get missed. And then I would just feel bad about it. And then I would just ruin other projects that I had to do.
Okay. How do you identify your big goals?
I sometimes get swayed with my big goals based on what other people think I should do. So some people thought that I should have a newsletter in October when I had 3,000 followers, and I should start building an email list. But I knew that I didn't have the time and the energy to devote to it. I was really focusing on building my Twitter community and finding my voice still and getting used to writing more on Twitter. So I didn't start a newsletter. And then in February, I felt like it was time to start the newsletter. And I don't know why I felt that way. I just did. So I decided to start doing a newsletter. And so for me, I really try to pay attention to how I feel and thinking about what do I really want? Because especially now with where I am in my content creation journey, I could start coaching more. I could have a course. I could do a
Mhm.
cohort-based course. I could start a YouTube channel. I could start a podcast. I could finish my book. And so I really have to tap into, what do I really want? Like, if I was to look back on my life in 5 years, what do I want to be at in order to decide what are the things I should be focusing on right now?
Once you identify what's your new big goals are, how do you execute them?
So I work backwards from what I want to do. So when I was creating content last year and starting on Twitter and doing Ship 30 for 30, I knew that I wanted to share ideas and figure things out, and start to inspire people. But I didn't really know what my niche was. But I knew that eventually I wanted to have a podcast or YouTube channel or something. And so I found Twitter Spaces. And even though I didn't have a huge goal yet of what I
Mhm.
want to talk about, or where I want to end up, I decided to start using Twitter Spaces to become a better speaker and just learn to moderate and facilitate better and build those skills, because I would like to run workshops or help people with things, or speak on podcasts like this, or have my own podcast, or be a public speaker. So I decided to just use that to keep building my skills. At this point, I've hosted or co-hosted almost 150 Twitter Spaces. I've been in more than that, where I've spoken or been a guest in them, but I know now that this really helped to refine my message, to refine my story. It's helped me to
Mhm.
speak more clearly, and also improve my Twitter presence by showing that I'm a person that leads Twitter Spaces. And now when I do a Twitter Space, I often will have people that will come to them because they know that I host Twitter Spaces a lot. So I use that the goal of wanting to be a speaker or a podcaster or something, how will I get there and build those skills? I could have just recorded myself alone, but I felt like this was like hitting more birds with one stone, of
Mhm.
building an audience, practicing in public, and speaking about these things and getting immediate feedback from people,
Right.
so that when I would do the next step of having a podcast or a YouTube channel or releasing a book or starting a course, that I would have people that already know, like, and trust me because of the time that I've spent in spaces and building my audience.
How do you decide what to put every time you create a newsletter? I tried 3 times. I started 3 times, and then next month it's didn't go.
I have a really hard time, like almost every week. I think I've done 8 issues now. And I skipped one week because I was really tired, but otherwise I've done it every week. And I have a hard time coming up with content. But in one of the first ones, I asked for ideas, and then I kept putting that at the end of my, PS, if you have ideas for me. So I have like a bank of maybe 5 or 10 ideas that people said, oh, I'd like to hear about this or how you do that. So I
Okay.
have those ideas on the side that I could use. But what I've been doing lately is either thinking about something I'm thinking about right now. So I was thinking a couple of weeks ago, oh, it's so strange that people are asking me to talk about these topics, and I didn't tell anyone that I'm an expert in this. I didn't tell anyone I'm an expert in Twitter DMs. I did write a newsletter not episode edition about it, about Twitter DMs, and hosted a Twitter space talking about it. But I don't go around saying that I'm a Twitter DM expert. But then somebody asked me to be a guest to talk about connecting in Twitter DMs. And there's several things like that I'm an expert in, or an expert that people have invited me to talk about. So I was thinking about that. That's weird that I'm not saying it, but people are asking me. So then I made my issue about that, about like, I'm an expert and I didn't have to tell anyone, but I just started doing things and people
Mhm.
noticed. And other times when I was stuck with what should I write about, I just looked at my tweets and just saw one that did well, or one that I could expand an idea upon. So I talked about it last week about finding your North Star, just remembering your why and why you're doing this. And it was kind of on my mind. And I think I'd written a tweet that was similar. And so I just look at that and just think, oh, what can I write more about? And then just start and see what
Mhm.
happens. And then I end up with some content. And I don't like to make my newsletter super long. Like, I have friends that write really long, in-depth newsletters, but I just find, for me as a consumer, I don't like to read that much. And then also it makes it easier as a creator to write less, and then
Mhm.
it's not as much pressure. Like, just keep it really practical and simple. And I just do 500 to 800 words. Sometimes it'll be 1,000 words, but I try to keep it a little bit shorter so that it's easy to read through and just give some practical advice.
So practical, so effective. Um, is there a question that I have not asked, but you want to answer?
No, you've done pretty well. You've asked lots of questions.
Is there a question for me?
What is the name of your podcast? I don't think that I know what it is called, or your YouTube channel, or whatever it is.
The channel name is Vinod Sharma. And then the podcast name is Career Journey Podcast.
Oh, okay. Perfect.
Last question. What is your message to the audience?
My message is that if there's something that you really want to do and you've been hesitating because of imposter syndrome or self-judgment or perfectionism or whatever it is, you should just start doing it, because those feelings don't go away on their own. I waited for 4 years for my imposter syndrome and my fears and perfectionism to go away. I waited for my niche to become clear. And I thought, oh, when my niche is clear, then I'll know what to do. But really, if I would have started 4 years ago and started creating content and figuring things out as I go, I would be way ahead of where I am now. And I know that the skills that I picked up in the last 4 years from reading about marketing and learning copywriting and observing people online of how do they do this, I know that it's helped me now to grow faster this past year than maybe if I knew nothing at all. But I could have started 5 years ago at this point when I knew that that's something I wanted to do. I could have started sharing things. And so my message is to just start and figure it out and set really small goals so that you don't burn out doing it, because it's really hard to learn how to be a content creator. Because even though we especially if you have a normal job, you probably speak to people every day, you write emails, so you know how to write, you know how to interact with people, maybe you've given presentations at work. But when you go and do that online and you start sharing your own observations or your own ideas and your own interpretations of things, it's really intimidating to share that perspective and feel like that imposter syndrome, like, who am I to talk about this? Is this the right way to say it? And it takes a long time to start to feel comfortable and to figure out your voice and what you want to talk about. But you're not going to get there if you don't just start sharing stuff. And so my main message is to just start and do a little bit every day and figure out, what do you like talking about? And also, what's the medium that you like talking about it? Some people hate doing tweets, but they like the long form of medium. Some people like podcasts. Some people like YouTube videos. And sometimes you start those things, but realize you don't love it. So some people start tweeting and realize they don't love it, but maybe they like YouTube videos. So I think it's really important to test out a lot of things, but do it long enough that you kind of push past those fears and you figure out if you're uncomfortable because it's new and you don't really know it and you're not used to your voice, or is it uncomfortable because you really don't like that way of expressing yourself? And so you can't find that out after 1 or 2 times, which I think happens to a lot of people, that they'll host one Twitter space and because it felt uncomfortable, they'll think they never want to do it again. But really, if they do like 5 or 10 and then decide, okay, I really don't like Twitter spaces or Clubhouse or whatever audio they choose, then you can really know if, is it just because, I don't like hosting and talking in these spaces, but I like contributing in them. Or I like sharing ideas, but I'd rather do a podcast so I don't have an audience right in front of me. So you have to give yourself a chance to push through it and figure out if you're uncomfortable because it's new or uncomfortable because it's something you really don't want to do.
Thank you. It was great. To echo what you just said, I posted something on LinkedIn today, and one of the line there was, the most powerful motivation tool for writers is the publish button.
Yeah, that's true.
Thank you so much, Samantha. This was a fun conversation. I loved every minute of it.
Thank you so much. It's been so nice. Thanks for inviting me.